Hey, Jimbo, you ready for this deal?
Turn him out.
Howdy, friends and neighbors. Time once again for the Cowboys of the Osage podcast with your hosts, Jimbo Snively and Cody Garnett. And here they are, the Cowboys of the Osage.
Woo! Everybody might have noticed a little something different right then. Rodney Lay Jr. sent me and Jimbo a brand new theme song.
And pretty cool, too. You know, he did a lot of voiceover. He was a disc jockey for KVO radio and does a lot of voiceover work, and it just really is professional.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good.
I thought it was the guy from Asleep at the Wheel at first, but it's Rodney Lay Jr. Thank you, Rodney Lay Jr., for that. And everybody let us know in the comments what you think about the new theme song. We're not stuck on it yet. We still like the old one, but
yeah.
I sure like the new one, too.
Right.
I got a hard decision on my hands here, Jimbo.
Right,
Me and
I
you
know,
do.
I know.
All right. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, brought to you by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum and the Buck and Flamingo Turquoise Shop, both located right here in historic downtown Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Hey, it's old Cody over here. And as always, I have my main man with me, Mr. Rodeo Historian himself, Jimbo Snively. Good to see you this morning, Jimbo. How you doing?
Hey, Cody boy, it's another great day in the Osage, man. And Cody, we're really privileged today. We've got Bill Kornell with us today, and he's the youngest guy to ever win the bull riding championship. He was 19 years old. If you can imagine, as long as they've been riding bulls, and he's the youngest champion they've ever had.
Yeah, you would think, I would have thought there would have been a slew of 19-year-old champions in the bull
Well,
riding.
it's kind of a young man's sport, but,
Yeah.
you know, there's also a lot of crafty veterans, too, at the same time. But that's pretty prestigious, you know, to be that recognized. But anyway, he's the youngest bull rider. He's the bull riding world champion, 1963. He made the NFR like 7 times. Just really one of the great bull riders of the 60s and early 70s, and we're just proud to have him with us today. Bill, welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
We're sure glad to have you. Where are you coming from? Utah, did you say?
I'm in Utah right now working for the wintertime, yeah.
Yeah?
Logan, Utah, which is up in the north part of the state.
Yeah. What do you do out there this time of year in the wintertime?
I can't imagine going to work in northern Utah in the winter
No,
time.
I'd go south in the wintertime, Bill. You got it backwards.
Well, anybody with brains would go south, but they offered me a job, and they paid enough that I decided to come fly for the winter, so I'm still flying airplanes.
Wow. Who are you flying? Are you flying hunters, or who do you fly this time of year?
No, we're doing a cloud seeding job. So we actually go up and try to make more rain or more snow, depending on the conditions that we're flying in.
Wow. We need some rain here.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah, I'm really surprised that where I'm at. Last year I was down in southern Utah, which needed the rain and all that kind of stuff. But up here they average like 5 feet of snow.
Right.
And they get quite a bit of rain. So, like I say, I'm really kind of surprised that we're even in this particular location. I know the state of Utah wanted a couple airplanes this winter, but you would have thought they'd pick drier areas.
Right. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Where were you raised up at, Bill?
Most of it, I was born in Oregon, then I was in Palm Springs for quite a little bit. I was in Southern California in the old days before it's like it is now, so...
Well,
then I graduated high school out of Palm Springs, California.
What makes a boy from Palm Springs, Southern California, want to ride bulls?
Yeah, something I did. I grew up riding. I was 2 years old when I started riding horses, and I was a cowboy guy and enjoyed that, and then just got into the riding bulls, and I was probably one of the best ever.
How far was that from the Oakdale area? I don't know my California geography very good.
A long ways.
Okay, because I knew there were a lot of cowboys in that Oakdale area.
Yeah, it used to be, yeah, it was quite the rodeo. We used to go to Oakdale for the rodeo, but yeah, there was a bunch of, and good cowboys, not just guys living there.
Oh, yeah.
Some old fast guys.
Absolutely. Huh. Well, who were some of the cowboys that you looked up to when you was a kid, made you want to ride bulls?
Well, Shoulders was one of the guys that then I became good friends with Jim over the years, and then there was a bunch of guys that were were good back in that day. It was different, I think, then than it is now, probably. I know when I first started, I got on a couple bulls in 1960. The first bull I ever got on was in 1960. And then the second one I got on was also in 60, and I went fourth on him. And then I had an appendicitis thing, and that pretty well took care of 60. And then 61, I went, well, I was a student of rodeo. I knew who guys were and, all that kind of stuff. But back then, I remember the first time I walked up towards one of the champions to introduce myself, he just turned and walked off. So until you actually proved yourself, they didn't have anything to do with you. They wanted to see you have try and, and the right stuff. And then they were there to help you and do all kinds of good things. But initially, no, it was different. I don't know how it is today, but that's how it was back then.
What about the judges? Did you have to prove yourself to the judges too?
Actually, yeah, I had a problem my whole career. Actually, there was a lot of times that I could have won a lot of stuff, and I didn't. I should have went to the finals in 64, about $4,000 in the lead, which would have been no way in Bob Winter. And like I say, Bob was a good friend, and he could damn sure ride bulls.
Right.
But yeah, and I remember one time in Phoenix in 65, it was the last year they were outside, which was too bad, because that was a really nice rodeo. And I rode a bull that had never been ridden. I rode 8 over my career that had never been ridden. And this was ranked. I mean, this was an easy, under today's deal, an easy 100. The whistle blew. I rode him about another round. He whipped me down, and I hung up forever. And one of the judges was actually sitting on the chute gate, on top of the chute gate, like they do from time to time. And he was jumping and kicking high enough, he actually kicked him off the chute gate back into the get-ready place. And he wouldn't mark me because he didn't see the whistle blow, even though the other judge said, yeah, he rode the bull and all of that. And I think as far as anybody can remember, that was the only time that guy was ever ridden.
Wow.
Oh,
so, yeah, it's a bit of a challenge sometimes to get judges to see what you see.
Right.
To be the youngest champion, Jimbo, he sure came on awful fast. His first couple bulls were in 1960.
Right.
Then he had appendicitis. Then 2 years later, he was a world champion.
Right.
Right. I grew up as a very athletic guy. I probably had just super athletic coordination and reaction time.
Right.
And it took a while. I rodeoed in 61, and I think I went $300. And I was all over. I went to Cheyenne. We rode bulls at 6 o'clock in the morning in the slack at Cheyenne, which will definitely get your heart going early. And then I was at Sydney, and the whole deal. And then I got hurt really bad in the fall of 61. And then I started back in May of 62. And it kind of got to riding a little bit. I actually won 3 real big, good rodeos. And then there was a huge jackpot in 62 right before the NFR. And I won it. And I always thought that kind of started me into the next season. And then the main shoot boss in those days was Sonny Linger, and he gave me a job to work the national finals. So I was actually the labor list in 1962 at the NFR. And then 63, things got off to a good start, and I went on, of course, to win the world. And that was still in L.A., so it was interesting. It was also interesting that a lot of the guys that I know real good or know about it, but in 63, and it was interesting. I talked to a bareback champ here a couple of years ago, and he'd only been a couple of years since he won the world. And we were talking about, how many rodeos that these guys go to today and then actually compete in. So in 1963, when I won the world, I actually competed in and got on at 94 different rodeos. And I win 35 of them. And I had a very high percentage of winning. And I rode like 70% of all the bulls I ever got on. So, and that was actually, and I won 4 rodeos in 62, and the world championship buckle in 63 was the first buckle I ever won after winning 37 rodeos.
Wow.
So you can see the scarcity of buckles back in the day.
They didn't give the buckles away back then like they do now, that's for sure.
They give buckle away for anything now.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much from what I've been told. And, it was interesting. Some rodeos, I went to Deadwood in 76. Well, it was a Centennial rodeo year. I had a bull called Centennial. I won the bull riding on him and nothing. And you think Deadwood, with all the Black Hills Gold and all the stuff would have something really nice, and they didn't give anything.
Huh. Just the attaboy.
Yeah, money, of course. That was the main thing.
Anyway. Yeah, the main thing anyway.
I tell you what, now they got a heck of a rodeo, Jimbo.
Do they?
They've really came on, and Deadwood's one of the bigger rodeos that time of year anymore.
Right. Huh.
Well, I'll be darned. It was always a nice rodeo to go to. It was a little bit of a challenge because it was a pretty good drive from any place, kind of like Burwell. You know, Burwell was a really good hot rodeo, really good rodeo, but it was a 100-mile drive over dirt roads back in the day.
Deadwood and Burwell, same time now, right during Cheyenne.
Right.
Oh, it is?
Yes, sir.
I was wondering
That's kind of bad timing, isn't it? You go to Cheyenne over Deadwood, I would think.
Yeah, everybody enters both of them. They get around it somehow. They set all the slacks up in the timed event so you can make it. And the rough stock riders, they enter for a different day.
I was wondering.
I keep saying, because initially we couldn't do that very well, and then it got where the secretaries would do it once they got to know you a little bit. Then, of course, when you got the computer, then it changed the whole steps of rodeo. Now, I mean, it made life a lot nicer. I can remember standing in a phone booth in Amarillo in a blizzard one time trying to get into Fort Worth. Nobody's dressed for blizzards if you're a cowboy.
I was wondering, when they had that slack at Cheyenne at 6 o'clock in the morning, did everybody go to bed that night, or did some of them bull riders just stay up?
Well, I drove all night. There was a guy named Hollywood Bob Maynard. He was quite the colorful bull rider. And in those days, you were at Salt Lake, and then you'd drive most of the night, or pretty much all night time you left the rodeo at Salt Lake to get to Cheyenne. So you didn't get, you get there about 5 o'clock in the morning. So riding at 6 o'clock, you had a little bit of time to get kind of going, but that was about it.
How many bull riders would they let enter that to have a 6 o'clock in the morning bull riding slack?
There are certain rodeos. Cheyenne was one of them. Fort Worth was one of them. They actually had quite a few contestants, more than you would at other rodeos, just because of what they were. Cheyenne at the time was a heck of a rodeo.
What was it like, 19-year-old kid, going to your first national finals in Los Angeles, Bill?
That was in his backyard,
Yeah,
too.
it was in your backyard, so I guess that wasn't a big deal. But what was the atmosphere like?
Well, it was a big deal. And, of course, I went in the lead, so I was the last guy to ride. And it was interesting. The first bull that I got on actually whipped me down, and I rode him. Of course, you don't get scores when you slap him that hard. But I actually threw my elbow out on my riding hand. And there was I can't remember his name. There was a doctor from Nebraska, just a super guy and a really good doc. And he went to the rodeos for years. He was at Oklahoma City, and he stitched my head up one time after a bull hit me in the chute in Oklahoma City. And he gave me, for the second performance, he gave me a shot of Novocaine, and he said, this will be, take care of the pain and stuff while you're riding. Well, my whole arm went to sleep. And that was Panicsville. But, I had to ride in order to win, because Dickie was close enough that there's a possibility he might beat me. And I'm thinking, holy shit, this isn't good. And I actually got my rope on this guy. And, of course, like I said, it was the last, which was awful good. And about to go in, maybe 10 minutes before my turn, I got my feeling back in my hand, and then I rode the next 7 bulls and went second in the average. Leo rode them all and win the average. Leo Brown from Canada. He was a good guy and a good bull rider.
Yeah.
Rode all 10 bulls that year?
No, 8.
8.
They just had 8 go rounds.
Oh, just had 8 go rounds.
Right.
Wow.
That's a good trivia question.
Do what now?
Well, Cody said they rode all 10 bulls. And I said, no, they just had 8 back then.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we rode 8 there, and then I can't remember if we was there in 62, 3, and 4, and then 65 we went to Oklahoma City. And somewhere in through there, they upped it to 10.
Right.
I'm not sure what year exactly it was that they did that, but whatever year it was. We rode 8 for a while, and then we ended up doing the 10.
Which place did you like better, Los Angeles or OKC?
I never really I liked Los Angeles, the arena and the atmosphere and everything. I always thought was better in LA I never did care for Oklahoma City all that well. And of course, some of the stuff initially, they actually had everybody that qualified riding in the parade, which was not a really good idea. And I remember one year, I can ride saddle horses and as good as anybody. And man, it was ice on the road, and I had this horse that was prancing and jumping and sort of occasionally bucking, and I did that for a little while, and I thought, this is crazy. This guy falls and breaks my leg or something, I'm out. I just stepped off with him and ass. That was the end of that. And I think that might have been the last year we all had to ride in the parade. Because I said something about, this is crazy. We're out here in this parade and a horse falls on us or something happens, and then suddenly we're out for the season. We're out for the finals at least.
That'd be bad.
So,
for sure.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah, horrible.
Were there any movie star rodeo fans there?
Do what?
Did any movie star rodeo fans show up to watch those NFRs in Los Angeles?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff, especially in L.A. They were all over the place.
Did you ever know Ben
Johnson?
L.A.
was a good rodeo. Yeah, it was a good rodeo. I mean, of course, you look at your money. I think the first year we went, we were riding for like $384 day monies.
Yeah.
So go around paid $384 back then. Now it pays right about $30,000.
Well, I think in '64 they went up to 4 something. And then I don't remember 71, maybe 70, 71, something like that. I actually placed on 7 bulls in a row and won second in the average and win 2,800.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had that now, you'd have to have a Brinks armored car to haul off your money.
Right, for sure. Did you ever meet Ben Johnson?
Yeah, I knew Ben. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he was a good guy. He was a team roping champion from the 50s.
Yeah, sure was.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a super good guy. And, he did terrific in movies. He just had the voice and the whole thing out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was perfect.
There was actually a lot of guys in Hollywood, not necessarily on the level that Ben was, but there was a lot of guys, especially bullfighters, that would go out there, about the time their career was kind of ending.
Yeah.
And be stuntmen, because they were terrific. Because, they're all athletic guys. Most of them are really super nice guys.
Right.
And then go to Hollywood and finish up for a few years of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be perfect stuntmen. They're about half crazy anyway.
Yeah. Tough.
Yeah, correct.
Wonder what makes a guy get in the line of work of bullfighting.
Do what now?
I wonder what makes a guy get into the line of work of bullfighting.
I don't know. I never do. I should have probably. Rodeo. I rode bulls for about 19 years. When I got crippled, I was still sitting 13th for the world, and that was in 1980. But I had no idea. The ones that did it, with a few exceptions, were just absolutely terrific bullfighters. And that was before they were, you had funny men. And we graduated into the bullfighters only, funny men only type of thing. Like Wick was probably the first straight bullfighter. That's all he did was fight bulls. So it was an interesting thing. They will all have to be in terrific shape. Because if you look at rodeo arenas, they're not exactly designed to run in. They're designed to land in. So they're all plowed and all that kind of stuff. So that makes it even harder for those guys to do the job and do it for 10, 12 bulls, whatever it is on a performance.
Do you know Buddy Heaton?
Oh yeah, I knew Buddy good. He was he was a big tough son of a gun at one time. Him and that buffalo. And actually at Calgary one year, I had ridden something and I jumped off when I was about to get to the chute, and the bull was about to beat me to the chute where I could jump up out of the way, and Buddy just reached down with one hand and lifted me up. Of course, I weighed 148 pounds, but that's still pretty heavy, and he just lifted me right up out of the way and set me down on the backside of the chute.
Were you at Calgary that time they had that tame lion out there in the arena when they're bucking bulls?
No, I wasn't. I heard about it, though.
I saw a video of it the other day. It's crazy, Jimbo.
Absolutely crazy.
It'd make me not get bucked off a bull. I'd rather deal with the bull than mess with the lion.
That's right.
I'd hang on extra tight, I guarantee you.
Yeah. Boy, you got that right. Well, I was at Denver one year, and I can't remember what I was getting on. It wasn't much. I remember he just kind of jumped and kicked. But I remember about the second, and normally you don't really hear a lot when you're riding. Pretty well focused until the world goes away. But I remember Cy Taylor was the announcer, and he said, I remember him saying, Bill, look out behind you. Well, there was actually the next bull, which was a great big high horn hooking bull, had got out of the chute, was following me down the the thing down the arena. And like you said, there's no way he's going to throw me off. And finally, the clowns got, and then pickup man kind of got them separated so I could jump off and get away.
I can't believe they had a lion out there.
I can't either. That's crazy.
It's the truth. I saw it with my own eyes,
I've
Jimbo.
seen it too. I've seen the video of it.
No,
we got to find out more
I
about
heard
that.
about it, but I wasn't there when that happened. So.
Right.
What about old Buck?
LeGrand.
What about Buck LeGrand? He's a guy from right here in
Buck
Osage County.
LeGrand, yeah, he was a tough hombre, and he could fight bulls for a little short guy. He was really, really good. I remember one time, Buck, I was at Little Rock, and I had some bull that if the clown could turn him back, he really bucked, and if not, he just went down through the arena. But he did a hook. And a Brahma, unlike the fighting bulls of Mexico, their eyes are open all the time. And so I'd talk to Buck, and bull riders and clowns are normally pretty good friends, about making a pass and turning this guy back to the left for me. That's what he liked to do. I remember watching Buck come across, and the bull just sidestepped and run right over the top of Buck. And he, of course, bounced up. He was a tough guy, but he was a good bullfighter and a really nice guy to be around. And then, of course, yeah, the greatest act I ever saw a clown perform was my wife just said the Clark, Bobby, and Jean. I was at Phoenix. That was the outdoor rodeo. The last year they had the outdoor rodeo. And nobody knew it, but Bobby had actually gone, and this was kind of a scary deal, because he had gone and built a trap door that was about 4 feet deep into the arena and then had it covered with dirt. And Butler had a bull called 210. He had one droopy horn and one other horn, and he bucked. He was a ranked bull. And he did hook. And he threw somebody off, and he was making this circle, and he was probably half a way across the arena when he saw Bobby standing on this trap door. And here he came, and I mean, I don't know how Bobby had enough courage, but he waited till he was almost there, hit the trap thing, and fell down, and the smoke come up. And this bull, I didn't know you could stop that fast. Actually stopped, and you could see the bewilderment. He was actually looking side to side, like, where in the heck did that guy go? I had him.
He was going to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was some nice stuff. I remember in Sydney, Iowa, Marty was there. Marty Robbins, just super good guy.
The singer Marty
and
Robbins?
He was, and like I say, he was at Sydney, Iowa, and he was a really super guy. A really nice guy for, cowboys, and we visited and all kinds of stuff. And he had a buckboard, and it had a skirting around the bottom of it. And one of the bullfighters actually got underneath it when they first pulled it out there. And then he pulled the stunt, and the entire band jumped off of the wagon and run for the gate. And Marty never even stopped playing. He didn't.
I wonder why he never wrote a ballad about a rodeo man. He was a gunfighter ballad all the time.
Yeah. Outlaws. And some of them rodeo guys were outlaws. He could have wrote a good song about outlaw cowboy or something.
Hey, speaking of songs, Jimbo's got 2 released right now on a CD, and you can buy them right here at the museum. Ben Johnson, cowboymuseum.com.
Oh, be nice. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff, been over the years, rodeoing, cowboys trying to do this, trying to do that. And, a lot of us started flying an airplane. I started flying, Larry actually, and I were traveling together in 65. And that's when we decided to fly. And Larry took his lesson first, and I took mine second. And then we, of course, both rodeoed out of airplanes for the rest of our careers. And then I kept flying for a living. And, of course, Larry went on to build a big national company of his own. So,
did you haul a lot of cowboys around with you?
Yeah, and once I started flying, 63, 64, I was driving, and in 65 I started. I got my license in 66, and then I started guys with like Gary LeFew and Dickie Cox and Quintana. We all traveled together for years in the airplane. And it was good, but what we did was we said, okay, we're going to enter, and because there's 3 or 4 of us, we just have to go. Well, we're still going to 85 rodeos a year. But we'd always go because one of us probably have a good one to get on. And then you'd have guys, the year Lee Markle won second, he was with me. And the year Bill Nelson won the world, he was with me. And so you have all kinds of guys that are riding help with expenses and stuff.
That probably saved on your body a lot, not have to get in them old rough cars.
Oh, man, I'll tell you what, you go to 94 rodeos driving by yourself, that's some serious driving. Yeah, and we didn't, of course, have sponsors and all that stuff. And we did some crazy stuff. I mean, one time, I don't know how come we did this, but we actually entered a rodeo in Huntington, West Virginia. So we went back to Virginia, and then when the rodeo was over, the Miss America pageant was also on, so that was quite interesting. And when we got ready to go from Virginia, we were actually up in Pueblo, Colorado the next night. So we drove all night and all day, and we got to Pueblo, and we didn't know for sure where the arena was, and we didn't have a whole lot of time, and we hired a cab to take us to the arena. So we followed the cab to the arena so we get there in time to ride.
I was always curious when you're flying around like that and you land in some of these little old rinky-dink airports all over the country. How'd you get to rodeo grounds?
Normally, you'd make a pass. In that day, I don't think it's the same today, but normally in those days, you'd make a pass over the rodeo grounds and somebody would run out and pick you up.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Then you get a ride. Yeah. Well, actually, one time, Freckles Brown and I were traveling together. We were going to a little rodeo in Colorado, and we got there, no airport. And it's like, holy shit. And so it was too far to go to the closest airport was too far away to fly and then drive back and get back in time. And there was actually a pasture right across the street from the rodeo grounds. And so I just landed the old airplane in the pasture, jumped out, crawled through the fence, and walked across the highway to the rodeo grounds. And Freckles and I rode, of course, and then we walked back and got in the airplane, and off we went.
Wow.
Sounds like that movie J.W. Coupe, Jimbo.
Right, it does a little bit.
Kind of, yeah.
Hey, might like there'd be a big ditch in that pasture that you didn't see. And
right.
J.W., he landed his in that pasture, and the cows ate all the canvas off of his airplane.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you start
there was quite a few guys that flew airplanes back in those days. There were some that before I did, and then there was some that, of course, doing it. And it was nothing to borrow a guy's airplane. I remember one time George Falk had something had gone wrong with his, and he'd borrowed mine for a couple days at the rodeo, and then I needed an airplane, and there was a guy in California who had a Mooney, and I ended up borrowing that for a couple days. So it was, because we all could fly. And it was nothing if you got in a bind to borrow somebody's airplane to go do something while yours was getting maintenance or whatever the situation might be.
Did you ever have any close calls up there in the air?
Not too much when I was rodeoing for a living. I've had a few since then because I flew for 20 years, about 25 years in Alaska, so that was a bit different. The only time I really had any, what I'd call a fairly close call, we were going from someplace the other. We had to go across the Rockies just south of Denver. And I had a couple guys from Texas in the airplane, Randy Majors for one, and we didn't have oxygen. We were like at 12,000, which didn't bother me at all. But it did to him, and he was having trouble breathing. And so I let down to a lower altitude and was in the clouds. And it was the first time I'd ever picked up ice. And I started picking up some ice, and I called center, and I said, hey, I'm getting this ice. And I had about 20 miles on the other side of Mars. I need to get a lower altitude. And we got a DC-3 in the way, they said. And I said, well, be a good idea if you got him out of the way. And so they did. And so I flew across, and, then once I got to the other side of the mountains, I let down and get rid of the ice. So that was the first ice experience I had. But other than that, not too much. No, you were pretty careful with... I was pretty careful. I know there were there were a number of guys that died because of lack of situation awareness or lack of what they can do and couldn't do. And I never got into those situations. You could either go or you couldn't go.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing in between, is there?
My maintenance program wouldn't have worked for that, Jimbo.
What, Cody?
My maintenance program.
No.
How I maintain things.
Right. No, I wouldn't borrow a plane off you.
I'd always be scared of my plane.
Right. I would be too. And I wouldn't get in a plane with you flying it.
I had a 310 one time, and we were up in North Dakota. There was 4 or 5 of us, and I took off, and I couldn't get the gear to come up. And so I tried everything that I'd ever read about to get the gear to work, and I couldn't. So I landed and taxied back to the shop, and I said, "Hey, can you guys see what the gear deal is? We're kind of in a hurry to get another rodeo." But they put it up on jacks and dropped it. So I walk in the hangar, and here's my airplane, half on jacks and half of the plane on the bottom of the hangar. So this is not good. So I managed to rent another airplane while they got that one repaired, and then flew back and got it. They paid for the rental, of course, and then flew back and picked up mine when they got it repaired. So little things like that can happen that have nothing to do with what you did. You're just like, holy shit, how did you do that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Some of them little things up in the air get you in trouble.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you got to be careful with that. But,
right.
The first cross country I ever did, I actually went from Texas to Pendleton, Oregon. I had a little 2-place airplane, PA-12, and hopped in it, and off I went. I flew up to Pendleton. That was my first cross country.
How long did it take you to get up there? You remember?
Yeah, 2 days.
So you stopped. How many times you have to stop?
You had to. Yeah, I stopped and spent the night someplace, and then went on the next day. It was way too far for a 100-mile-an-hour airplane.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a long ways up there to Pendleton, no matter how you do it.
Yeah.
It is.
No shortcuts.
Well, like I said, Freckles and I traveled together quite a bit. And why we ever did this, I've got no earthly idea. But we actually worked in Nampa, Idaho at night, and Burwell, Nebraska in the daytime. And it was one of the few things, actually, when I was going into Burwell, I was about a 3-mile final, and I started losing oil pressure. And I was like, man, this isn't good. Oil pressure, whether it's in a car or an airplane, you start losing it, it's bad news. And I ended up landing, and the oil pan had cracked.
Ooh.
And back then, it was a whole lot easier than it is today to get stuff done. So I actually found a guy that had a hangar and some tools and stuff, but he didn't have any maintenance people around. So I actually pulled the engine out of and I worked on airplanes, not mine. And so I actually pulled the engine out of the thing and put the oil pan, drove to Omaha that night, and drove back and reinstalled it and put it in. I got done about 6 in the morning, and I went and got Freckles up because he didn't think we were going to fly. And off we went to Nampa, and we got, I don't know, an hour and a half or so out of Burwell. And I asked Freckles, I said, "You have fun?" No. And he said, "Well, here's your first lesson. I got to have a nap." So I did. I mean, I've been up a day and a half at that point. So I told him what to do and how to do it. And I said, "Wake me up in an hour and I'll be good to go again." And we were right on course. He just did a heck of a job. An hour later, he woke me up and off we went to Nampa.
Here, Freckles, take the wheel. I got to take a nap.
I don't believe I'd have slept very good.
Yeah, Freckles was a good guy. We traveled together a lot. He was just a super good guy. It was really too bad when he died. He died early from cancer.
Right. Who were some of the other guys that back then that were good bull riders?
Well, I mean, most of the guys we traveled together off and on at one time. Like Larry, Megan, and I traveled together a fair amount. Then we both got airplanes. We didn't travel quite as much. But you traveled with guys. Like when Don Mayo got hurt in the car wreck. Me and Paul and Don was traveling together. We were left up there at Four Corners heading to Missouri, and then the fog at night, and a drunk pulled over and whacked us and stopped us and broke Don's back, and he was in the lead for the bareback riding championships.
I remember as a little kid when that happened.
Yeah, it was a really bad thing, and it was even worse. The ambulance got there, and this drunk's laying in the middle of the road, and we're over to the edge of the road, and I knew Don was hurt bad. And I was outside of the car, and Don was still laying in the front seat. And this ambulance crew started to pick up this drunk, and I went over and kicked him off the stretcher. And he said, "No, you're going to help this guy. This guy's hurt. This guy's the one that caused it." And they did. They went and grabbed Don and went to the hospital with him. But back then, your back was broke. It was the end. Even today, some of them are getting by a little bit better, but he was paralyzed from then on, which was just awful for what happened.
Right. Were you ever around George Paul very much?
A lot. Yeah, George was a good guy. I can tell you a really funny story. George was tough. He could damn sure fight. And we were at Oklahoma City at the NFL, and George was as good as anybody.
Right.
And there was a guy his name was Okanagan Paul.
Yeah, we heard him.
Yeah, Okanagan. The first time I met Okanagan Paul, I actually got a ride with one of the bullfighters from Odessa to Denver. And I didn't know him, but I knew who he was. And I don't think I slept the entire trip. I didn't trust this guy at all. And actually, he was a super good guy. We got to be friends, but he was bad news. I mean, really, he's probably the baddest guy that ever was. And we were at the NFR, and back in the get ready area, me and George, and Okanagan walked in, and he was drunk like always. And he turned around, and I said hi, and we visited a second. He turned around and walked out, and George said, I don't know who that drunk Indian is, but I think I'll just go whip his ass. I said, that's Okanagan Paul. You might want to reconsider. I think you're right, he said.
Oh, we've heard a lot of... He wound up in Pawhuska.
He spent a lot of time around here.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories on him.
Didn't he live in a teepee out west of town?
George. You do what?
I think he lived in a teepee out west of town right here by
for a
Pawhuska.
while. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he was actually, what I was told, I don't know this for sure enough fact, but I was actually told that he was probably the most decorated war hero of all, above Audie Murphy. They put him in with a regiment of people he didn't really care for. There was 18 of them. He took a machine gun and mowed them all down. And that was the only reason he didn't get more awards than Audie Murphy.
Wow.
And he was one of the people, you see the picture of the guys holding the American flag up during World War II. And he was one of the guys holding that flag up.
Well, I heard he carried a pretty sharp knife, too.
Yeah, and a pair of white gloves with leads in them. There was Billy Minnick, a good guy, Billy is. We traveled together. And he had a party in Fort Worth one time on a second-story thing. And for whatever, a big, nice room. And for whatever reason, there was one single bed up against the wall, but there was about 2 feet of space. And Matt Griffith, who was a really tough guy and good guy, he was both good. And but he was, bandying around there and kind of challenging Okanagan a little bit. And all of a sudden, you hear this whack. And Okanagan had backhanded Mac, and Mac was about 175, and he was, stolid. Upside down in this other side of the bed, and he walked over and he said, Mac, he said, if you mess with me again, I'm going to kill you. And that was the end of the story.
Yeah, he probably would have, too.
He would have. He was, the old guys in like Jim and Harry and all that older group, bunch of bronc riders and bareback riders, when they used to go to New York, and at the old guard, and I went to the new guard, I never did go to the old guard. And talks about Okanagan, be gone for 3 days and come back, and he'd have all these body parts. He'd lay on the bar and have a drink and laugh. So, yeah, he was somebody you didn't mess with much.
Ooh, sound like it.
Sounded like a wild man.
Yeah, I remember there were some people helped him get out of trouble and brought him to Pawhuska, and they kind of wished they hadn't brought him here before it was over with.
I heard some story. I don't even remember the whole thing. Something about shooting someone out of the teepee during a horse trade out there, and I don't even know. I think Ike Rude was in on it. I'm not sure.
No, it was Willard Combs.
Oh, okay.
But anyway.
Yeah. He was a good guy. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, you said Wild Man. When I wrote Wild Man at Cheyenne, it was the first time he'd been written in almost 3 years. So when you put that into perspective, because Harry Knight owned Wild Man, of course, he had all of the big rodeos, so everybody that could ride had been on this guy, and he throwed everybody off the rodeo at Cheyenne. He was something that they probably wouldn't get on today. If you made just a little bitty mistake, he'd knock your teeth out. And he just had little short horns, but it was the way he bucked and the way he flung that head. He could hit you from almost any angle.
Hmm.
So you were saying something about the old garden and the new garden. What was the difference in those?
Correct.
Where were they located at in town?
Well, the old garden was actually a rodeo in New York, and it lasted 30 days. And then they quit having that about 1960, maybe 61, somewhere right in through there. They quit doing that. And then a couple, 3 years later, they actually, what I call the New Garden, it actually had a rodeo. It was about a week long. It was still in New York, of course, but it was Madison Square Garden, but it wasn't quite the same venue that the earlier one had.
Was it just right downtown there?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. New York at one time, back then, I actually went back there a couple times. I was in a book by Men by Scavallo. And I went back to New York, was back there about a week, and I was on a TV show back there one time. It was actually really not too bad a place to be. You didn't want to wander around too much at night. But during the daytime, it was pretty good. It wasn't nothing like it is today. No. And so, I wouldn't even go back there today. I mean, this is like without a SWAT team or something.
Right.
But back then, it wasn't that way. Yeah, it's just, some of these places that you used to go to, they're a little bit out of control today.
Right.
But they were all pretty good places to go. The only place that I can ever remember going that I didn't ever go back to was Chicago. And that was I think I was there in 63. And I was there with a bunch of good cowboys. And the area we went through, just getting to the rodeo grounds, is, this is a little scary. And I never went back again after that.
Wow. But
that was about the only one that I can remember that was a little bit problematic to get to. Even L.A., when we were there for the finals, was a fine place. It was actually pretty nice. Of course, you got to look at the population back then versus what you have in even big cities like L.A. was a big city back then. Nothing like it is today as far as population goes.
Right.
Did you ever travel abroad and go to any rodeos outside the United States or do any...
what now?
Do you ever do any rodeos outside the United States besides Canada?
Well, I went to a lot of rodeos in Canada. They had some dandies. Calgary was a super rodeo. And then and Edmonton was good. Saskatchewan, Red Deer. There was a bunch of Canadian rodeos. And we actually had a rodeo in 64 in Hawaii, in Honolulu. Jim sent over some stock, and some other guy sent some stock over there for it. It was quite the deal also. So, yeah, you went, and we did a rodeo with Harry, and Jim wasn't there, but Tompkins was there, and some of the great bareback riders, Akers, and some of those guys in Tijuana, 63 or 4, somewhere back there.
Casey Tibbs took a bunch of cowboys to Japan one time.
Correct. Yeah, I didn't go on that. Casey was a good guy. I knew Casey good. And, yeah, they went, I knew a bunch of guys that did, that turned into champions after they came back. So...
Did you get to see Harry Tompkins ride any bulls, or was he done when you were going, Bill?
Oh, no. When I started, I started actually going down the road with the big rodeos and the big guys in 61. Mm-hmm. So Harry and Jim and Casey and all of those guys, Acreage and all the bareback rider, Bushbaum, all of that, but Marty Wood and I traveled together. They all rodeoed up until about 64 to 65. Depending on that. And I think Harry actually rodeoed to about 66. So it was, I got to know them all personally, and they could still ride pretty damn good.
Yeah. What made Harry so good?
Well, they just had that balance.
Yeah.
There's like me. You get the balance. I called it one with the bull, and Harry was like that. Mm-hmm. And he just was so unmovable. I mean, he never seemed like he ever got out of position or anything like that on it, whatever he got on. I mean, the guy could probably ride as good as anybody ever has or ever will.
Right.
He may not have had the try and the stamina that Jim had, but, I mean, just pure bull rider. Harry is as good as anybody.
He could make it look so easy, is what I always heard about him.
Correct. Which is not necessarily a good trait.
Right.
I did similar the same things, and it actually, you make it look easy. You ride some bull that's 24, 25, and people think, wow, that's pretty easy. You must not be that ranked.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a good trait.
Right.
It's a good trait from riding standpoint, like the way I rode and the way Harry rode, but it was not necessarily good from a judging point of view because it cost you money.
Cody, he's the one that waved at the cameraman.
Yeah, he's got that one of the most famous rodeo pictures of all time. I think it's in Cheyenne. He's just sitting there Like he just sitting on his couch at home,
Right,
just waving at the camera, riding a big brindle bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's a hell of a picture, ain't it?
Yeah, it is.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a really terrific picture. Yeah, I like that.
What about Murtis Dykeman?
Murtis was a good guy, and I've actually got a picture from Los Angeles in 1962, and Murtis was fighting bulls.
Yeah.
But he was a good guy. We were good friends, and he could ride pretty damn good. And he was a really nice guy. Then, of course, he went to work for the hat company for years after he took rodeo when George still had it.
Yeah. What about Bob Wagner? He's raised up right here west of us a few miles.
Right. Yeah, Bob could ride anything that had hair on it. He was a damn tough bull rider and a really good guy. And later I think that's the time after he got rodeo, and he had some mental problems that caused some problems. But he had some interesting idea. Bob was the one that had the springs in the spurs. Now, I bought my spurs from John Hawkins, who was a world champion bareback rider, for $10 in 1962. And Bob came up with these things that had the spring between the shank and what part goes around your foot. And it was a really terrific design, but the spring part didn't work very well. So the guys that had Freckles rode in them for years, but they all took a piece of wire and put that spring out of commission. So you'd grab with the spring, and then the spring would have a tendency to pop your feet out when you not necessarily want it. And then Bob also was the one that came up with, I only rode out of them once, and it was rather frightening, actually. He actually came up with a chute system that the gate just disappeared. You know, like normally you swing a gate open. Well, the bulls are smart, I mean, especially these big rank guys. And they know what side the gate's going to open on by the way the people are, and they'll hit that gate a little bit. I used to be able to hold that gate a little bit to get me out with it. And this system just dropped it out of the way. I mean, it was just gone. And I was at Long Beach when the first time that I think they used it a couple times later, but it was the only time I ever rode out of it. And you didn't know what was going to happen. And then you got there, and there's nothing to hold on to, no support of any kind, and you nod, and the gate flies open, and it just disappears. And I can remember this bull I was on, actually, it was a bucker. And he actually didn't know what to do either. He'd never done this before. So you got this half-second delay, and it's like, holy cow. And then, of course, he starts bucking like heck, and it was an experience you didn't need to have of any kind.
You know, he took a case all the way to the Supreme Court one time. He started another rodeo association, and I think the RCA made it where you couldn't be a member of that one and a member of that one, and he ended up losing, but he did take that case.
Actually, yeah, in 1964 or 5, he actually had organized and was doing the same thing as the other bull riding group, the PBR.
What is it? Yeah, PBR.
Yeah, PBR. Yeah, it was exactly the exact format that the PBR is using today. And yeah, they actually sent him out of the association for a couple of years, which is really, I thought they were a little heavy-handed over that. I mean, if you went to not so much cowboys riding events, but the ropers, you know, I mean, I get a chance to go someplace and rope for $30,000-$40,000. They're going to go, and so some of them are going to some of the jackpot amateur type stuff, and the RCA'd find out, and they'd throw them out and fine them. And then, of course, they passed the right to work law, and then that stopped the RCA from doing what they're doing. So, but they've always been a little bit anti-cowboy for whatever reason, even though the cowboys are what, you know, makes them go for the rodeos. So,
right. Yeah, if all the cowboys didn't pay their dues, there probably wouldn't be a PRCA.
No.
Well, actually, after the deal they're pulling with Mahan, they shouldn't be one.
Yeah, that sounds kind of bad.
Yeah, that's not something that should have happened. But anyway, what happens, I guess.
If anyone wants to know, I think the best person to just go look at Bobby Brown's Facebook. He put a statement out about it here a few months ago.
So. Did he?
Yeah, I didn't. I heard part of it, and that's all I know.
Yeah. What made you retire when you did, Bill?
Actually, I got my knee tore off. I was still sitting 13th for the world when I went to. It was interesting in 1960 when I won second in that or fourth on that bull, I won $30.50. But I'd never see another bull day. When I got hurt, I also won $30.50. And it was the 2 or 3 times that I've gotten hurt. One time I got hurt really bad. I should have killed me, and it didn't. Was actually something that should have happened. But the others were just kind of like freak accidents. And I've hung up to a lot of bulls. Hanging up is, it looks spectacular as heck, but it's not really a big earth-shaking event in my mind. But when I hung up to this bull in 1980, he was a small guy, and he actually stepped on my ankle and then turned into my knee and wiped the knee. And when I went to Davos, of course, Pat Evans was the guy in those days, and I went to Davos for the exam, and I was sitting on the exam table, and the doctor, Pat was out of town, so his assistant was going to come examine me. And he lifted my leg up, and then he could bend it 90 degrees to the left. Which they're not designed to do that, of course. And so that was the end.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I say, I was hitting 13th of the world. I missed the 7 finals. I actually missed 3 because of serious injuries over the years. 66, I got hurt real bad. 69, I got hurt bad. So, and then, of course, 80. So there was a lot of stuff like that cost me some, 3 or 4 extra trips to the NFL.
Had quite a long, successful career. Maybe one of the longest and successful in bull riding.
Right.
It was, but it was interesting. You look at guys that are the best, and you don't see them getting hurt very often. And the longest I ever went without a career or season-ending injury was 4 years out of the 19 I rode. And it was freak accidents. Like 66, I was at Cheyenne, and I was riding bareback horses more, and I could ride bareback horses pretty darn good. I rode Democrat, which was one of the rankest in the business at that time, for my first horse. I was getting on my second one, and he flipped upside down, and they had him tied to the chute. They let him go before the gate opened. He flipped upside down, and instead of just going forward backwards, he went over an angle, and then caught my elbow up against the 6x6 bracing where the boards are nailed to, and broke my riding wrist. So I was out for the rest of the season. And in 69, I had never in my life, I had seen pictures, and everybody has heard about the sun fishing bulls. And I was in Oregon, and I actually had one that jumped straight up in the air, all 4 feet, 90 degrees to the left, and that's how we came to the ground. It just smashed my head into the ground. And the guys at the chute told me, said, man, it looks like your head was about an inch thick. And the very next night, I flew to Butte, Montana, and exactly the same thing happened to me. And this slam, and I had a really bad brain kick. I lost part of my memory bank. So it was serious head injury. And it was there again. It was one of those freak accidents in 69. So, and then 77, I had my first knee surgery, and I jumped off a Billad Road. And I'd seen Dickie at Cheyenne one year, jumped off on the tail of his rope. One of the things you do when you roll your rope up and put it in your rigging bag, and when you unroll it, you make sure that there's no end piece that's not straight. That's something you just do. Mm-hmm. And I jumped off this bull in Casper, and I was always good at getting off. I almost probably 95% of everything I ever got on that I didn't get thrown off of that I rode, I jumped off on my feet. And the rope wrapped around my spur and hung and twisted it off, and there I was. I was out of condition with knee surgery. Not just freak accident.
Do you follow the PBR much nowadays, Bill?
Not a lot, no.
Yeah.
I used to stay with rodeo a little bit for a good number of years, and then they kind of went to the helmets and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of turned me off a little bit.
Yeah.
You guys didn't have any safety equipment back then, did you? No padding, vest, or no helmet or anything, did you?
Well, I don't think the vest might be okay. I don't know. You get one of the steps on you, they're going to hurt no matter what you're wearing. I've never been a believer in helmets. I mean, there's occasion when you might want to ride occasionally in the helmet. There was a bull called Dry Valley years ago that you put a helmet on if you had to get on him. I know Buddy Peak rode him one time, and he's going to hit you. I mean, it wasn't if he's going to hit you. He's going to hit you. And Buddy put a catcher's mask on. And he must have hit him 4 or 5 times. You could see the bruises all the way around the mask. But as a normal rule of thumb, no. And a funny story, I was at one of Walt Oswald's rodeos, and Bill Reinstein was the bull riding director. Bill and I were good friends. He was a good, tough bull rider. And he was the bull riding director at the time. And I had one of Oswald's bulls that had been hitting him or everybody. Well, you got to remember that we didn't have cell phones, so I couldn't just hit, auto dial and call Bill. I had to call the rodeo office. He was at Sydney. I knew where it was at. And leave a message at the rodeo office and then leave a phone number where he could call me back. So it's not an easy deal. So anyway, I called Bill, called the secretary and left the message. And actually, Bill called me back in about 30 minutes. And I told him the thing. And he said, Bill, he says, he's never really hit anybody that could ride. He says, if he hits you, we'll take him out of the draw. So I got on. He didn't hit me, and so we didn't take him out of the draw. He kept hitting kids. So, but there's no real, I saw, it must have been a year ago, somewhere along in there, I actually saw a guy that get thrown off. I think he broke his neck. I think it was the inner part. And if you watch that real closely, with the helmet's actually what broke his neck. And I've just never really been a fan of helmets. The rule says cowboy hat, not helmet.
Right.
And for most all bulls you got on, I never put one on, and I got on some bad caps. And I never got, I got whacked a couple of times, but not enough to hurt anything. A few stitches here and there. But
shaving scar.
I just never was. Yeah, I did. Well, I rode at Long Beach and got hit like 6 seconds and, 4 stitches, but I finished the ride 1 second, jumped off, and got some stitches.
Right.
So overall, I just don't think there's a need for helmets, and I think that they cause more problems than they actually are good for.
Right.
And like I used to say, for that scared, go home.
Right. Right. What do you think about these bulls these days, that breeding program they got?
Well, I think that, there's been the argument about what this was when I was riding and what this is when they're riding today. A rank bull is a rank bull.
Sure.
And I think, and there was to a certain degree, and it's not like it is today. I think it's a terrific idea. I mean, if you can get these bulls to throw calves, I mean, back in the probably late 60s, maybe early 70s, there was a bull called Speck. Butler and Son owned him. He ranked cat. Ronnie Rosin was the first guy to ride him. Yep. And he had a bunch of calves out. And I actually rode one of his, they had a big jackpot south of Lubbock, Texas, during the Lubbock rodeo one year, and I went down there and rode one of his calves, and he was a rank cat. So they've had, not like they are today, but I think it's a terrific idea. If you want to get on good bulls, you don't want to get on just junk. You want to get on something that turns back and bucks. That's what the money's won on, and if he can ride, that's the kind you want to get on. So if they can come up with these breeding programs, that's terrific. I know Lucky Herford, a friend of mine in Arizona, was involved in that for a bit, and he had some pretty good calves that he was selling. So, and then years ago, Tommy Steiner, who was probably one of the best bull guys in the business at that time, and I remember he brought 20 bulls to the Shreveport, or not Shreveport, one of those Louisiana rodeos. And and I always, because when I started, and people got the help from them, the contractors were super good to me. And so when they did a favor, I'd be the first one to jump on something for somebody, even after I won the world. And so we did. There was a bunch of us got on these 20 bulls, and 19 of them turned back and bucked. But breeding, if you can breed them right, if they can throw right, they don't always throw right, of course, we don't know that. But yeah, that'd be a terrific program, but it's a long, drawn-out program. You figure out what, it takes almost a year to have a calf, and then you get a calf, and it's going to be a couple more years before he's solid enough to start bucking. They got to wait for the bones and everything to set, so you're looking 2 to 3 years down the road. And then you got to bring them on right. You got to get that little, I think it was Kinney Brothers that had a dummy that they could put on a bull, and he was wired up above, and they could let him ride for a couple jumps or so, and then they'd pop the dummy off of him. Yeah. So they actually got to throwing people off and got to realizing, and then get them to turn back and that kind of stuff. So that's what you want. You want something that bucks. I used to just crave bucking bulls. And you don't always get them. I went to Denver one year, and I raced at Denver, and then I won Mercedes. I rode a bull that had never been ridden before. Never threw me off, and that was the first time I placed after Denver. So almost, 4.5 months? So, yeah, so you want bucking bulls.
Yeah.
Whew, that seems. I think what we need to do together is get some bull rider genetics from like this guy, a few other guys, and let's start breeding some bull riders, Jimbo.
Yeah, I think
to ride these bad dudes.
I know it, because you watch a performance now, Bill. You might have 10 bulls out and might just get one of them rode. I don't know if that's good or not.
Well, I can remember that same thing. The year I won Cheyenne, there was only a couple bulls ridden. And the year I should have won Calgary the same year, I won second. And I think there was 3 guys that made the whistle. So that wasn't unusual even back then.
Really?
For the short grow, not necessarily the rodeo itself, but for the short grow. Yeah, you'd throw off more than would make the whistle.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's when I was riding or when these guys are riding today. A rank bull is a rank bull.
Sure.
Period.
Yep.
There's probably just more of them in a pen now. There used to be 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're showing up with 30.
Right.
All rank.
Well, you got more bull riders too. That's the other thing. Yeah, and I agree with you. There was, you're right. You get a pen of bulls for the short grow, and they probably have 3 or 4 that were 24, 25. And then the rest of them were 22, 23, the kinds you should ride, but you don't always ride them, of course. And there's more bucking bulls because they have to have more because there's more cowboys. I think Fort Worth was always a big thing, but you look at a lot of the rodeos today, I think are probably 1 head ridings, and we would get 2 head and a short go around. Well, Calgary was always that way. Cheyenne was that way. Fort Worth was that way. They get 2 bulls at San Antonio and 2 at Houston. So that's probably changed somewhat.
Right. Bill, if you were making a Mount Rushmore of bull riders, who would you put on it? Need 4 names.
Well, you'd have to start with Donnie. I mean, Donnie won more championships than anybody, and Donnie and I rodeoed together, and the cat could ride, and he could rodeo. And that's why they have the Donnie Gay rule, which I've always been against. I mean, the rule says most money won for a year, so let's throw it open.
Right.
But then you got Jim Shoulders. I mean, and then you got Sage McKenzie. I mean, so you got these guys that are all multiple champions. So they got to be on the top of that list somewhere.
Right.
And then you go down a little bit lower, and you got guys that you got Harry Tompkins was 5-time champion, so you got that pretty well takes care of the 4 of them right there.
What about Freckles?
Well, Freckles won the world, but he wasn't in that same category that Donnie and myself and Jim and those guys are. He rode bulls, consistently for a long time, but he wasn't that caliber as far as the top 4 bull riders, in my opinion.
Yeah. What made him?
He was a good guy.
Yeah. What made him so famous? He rode him so long. He was riding good when other guys at a time when other guys would have retired. That's what.
Yeah. Correct.
Made Freckles so famous.
What about old Tough Hedeman or Lane Frost? What do you think? They need to be on there?
Tough was the Lane won the world 1 time, and he was a good bull rider. Tough won it 3 times, so there's your answer there. And Tough quit because he got whacked with Bogacious, which whacked him pretty hard, is what I understand. I don't know the story for sure. But, so there again, yeah, I don't know him very well. From what I've seen of him, he can damn sure ride bulls. But you said the top 4, not, there's a lot of guys out there.
Oh, yeah, I'm just throwing stuff out there asking you.
Yeah.
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 From what I understand, Jake, and I like him. I don't know him personally, but what I've seen of him ride at the NFR and stuff, the guy could darn sure ride bull, and he's just a super good guy.
Yeah, that's a heck of a Mount Rushmore you put together there, for sure. I'd put them up against anybody going.
That's a pretty admirable Mount Rushmore, I say, Jimbo.
Right.
No doubt about it.
You said you're flying. You flew a lot up in Alaska. What were you doing up there?
Well, I did a lot of stuff. In the old days, when I first went up there, I was flying a lot of ski planes.
Right.
And it was really bush flying because we had back then. All of the strips were built along the village. All of the villages were built along a river, and all rivers don't run straight necessarily. So most of the strips had turns in them, and it was kind of interesting flying. Where they've gone in now, which is really not a good deal. They've gone in now and rebuilt a lot of the strips. Back then, they were all in the village. So when you landed, people knew you were there. When they came out, everybody in the village come out to get mail and food and whatever else you had on the airplane. Some of the newer stuff that's farther enough out. I remember landing at a new strip up by Fort Yukon one time and snowing like heck. And it's 5 miles from town. And I must have waited 30 minutes and somebody just happened to come out to the airport. Nobody in town even knew I'd landed. So from that standpoint of view, it's certainly not as good as it used to be. And then after that, I went into the commuter airline business. So I was flying a commuter airline for quite a few years for a big company that's no longer in business. And then I went to flying Super Cubs off airports. So you're taking the Super Cub on great big huge tires and into 350, 400 foot, maybe 450 if you're lucky, strips. So you really got to have your stuff together because you're going in heavy. You don't have a scale, and you're going out with more because you're flying hunters. So you got to be able to judge how much is actually on the airplane. And then I finally ended up going to Southeast Alaska, where everything down there is flying floats. So I ended up flying floats down there for a good number of years.
You think you'd have buzzed the village like you did the rodeo grounds back in the old days. Let them know you're coming.
Yeah. Actually, in I don't know what year it was after I quit, so it'd be in the 80s, maybe early 90s, someplace up there. I'd actually been working out in the bush, and Anchorage was just a small town. I mean, it's nothing like it is today. And I was driving down Northern Lights Boulevard, and there's a rodeo grounds and a rodeo going on. And I had no idea there was even a rodeo in Alaska. So I pulled in there, and there was 4 or 5 guys that I knew from the rodeo in the lower 48, and they'd all gone to Alaska and started a rodeo association. They had quite a little rodeo deal going on there for a while. I actually bought a team roping horse and went to team roping and did pretty good with that. And then I judged a few of them for them. And then that one year, they had one bull that was just a nice draw. I mean, anybody that could ride in the top 15 is going to ride this calf. So up there's nobody that's going to make the top 15. And so they actually give Bobby Del Vecchio $5,000 and paid his expenses, of course, if he could ride this stuff. Well, of course, Bobby could ride bulls pretty damn good. And he came up and just rode. And I told him, I said, you guys might as well have your check ready. And he just rode him. It was not a big thing for him. It was just a really good draw kind of guy. But yeah, they had that. So as far as I know, it's still going on. I got away from it when I started working in farther out of Anchorage. When I was flying the commuter, I was based in Anchorage. And I flew smoke jumpers out of Fairbanks for a long time, putting fires out and that kind of stuff. So I've done about all the flying that you can possibly do, the different types of flying that you can possibly do.
Right.
Well, that's something else. That is something else. You ever had a bear on the runway you couldn't land? You had to buzz by the bear, get him to move?
Actually, in Dead Horse, up on the North Slope, yes. You had bear problems and you had caribou problems. So you might be coming in on approach and break out and there's a bear on the runway. So, yeah, and you go around and hopefully you get the heck out of the way and come back in and land or the caribou's crossing. So eventually they got where they kind of kept them off. But initially, no, you'd have to be heads up for that kind of stuff. In Dead Horse in the old days, when I was first up there in the late 80s, the hardest thing, you come to a screen door or something like that, and the door, you just open it and walk out. And up there, you got to stop. You open the door and stop, because there could be a bear laying right there on the porch or something. You don't want to step on a grizzly. They're not real friendly when you do that. So there was actually a guy got killed in Wyoming the other day. He was mountain bike riding. He should have known better. He was a ranger, so he should have been heads up. But he was mountain bike riding, come around a corner and went head into a grizzly bear.
Ooh.
And it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work out well.
Should have picked a stick up off the ground. Fought him.
Pepper spray or something would have been real handy about that time.
Woo. Well, Mr. Court, we sure appreciate you coming on today and sharing some of your old rodeo stories with us.
Well, this has been a good one, Cody.
It's been one of my favorite ones so far, Jimbo.
It sure has. It sure has.
Especially when he started talking about Okanagan.
Yeah.
You don't hear that name come up too often these days anymore.
No, I wasn't expecting that.
Well, you guys have a great day, and thanks for having me on. It was fun. I enjoyed it also.
Yes, sir, and we appreciate it.
We thank you,
bet.
Bill.
Yep.
Appreciate you,
You
man.
betcha.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for all those good
Howdy.
bull rides all those years.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I did a few. All right.
Yes, sir. Boy, howdy, Jimbo. That was a good one.
That was a really good one.
I really enjoyed it. I'm trying to thank, we don't give you enough shout outs. We do sell your CD right up here at the museum, and we're getting it listed on the website this week. You can order, Jimbo has 2 songs on it. They're recorded by Oklahoma Mike, a singer, and you can order it right off of Ben Johnson, cowboymuseum.com. And also, we got a new book coming out. We don't. Sammy Rude, a good friend of ours, Ike Rude's daughter, wrote a book about Ike Rude's life, and it's available for pre-order right now on benjohnsonCowboymuseum.com. And
I can't wait for people to get that book in their hands, Cody. That's really a good book.
if anybody still has a CD player, I can't wait for them to get your CD in their hands, Jimbo.
It'll play on the DVD too in the car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. See y'all next week.
Thanks.
Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, cowboys of the Osage.